Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Crowing Cockerel Podcast. I'm Graham.
I'm Thom.
And I'm Mark.
And we'll be chatting through the news, the noise around the club, throwing in a bit of nostalgia here and there.
A few unsubstantiated rumours based on nothing more than social media.
And hopefully we won't descend into an incoherent row over the whys and wherefores of the emotional rollercoaster that is our every Tottenham Hotspur season.
So, first episode, what's the big news?
Well, I'm not sure. I guess we could talk about Ange leaving the building.
It makes me sad already. I've spent, probably the same as you guys, just a good couple of weeks constantly watching reels and videos and comments and just feeling bloody great. And then we got the news that I think a lot of people were expecting, but I was still getting the reels and the news and the and the stuff coming through, and it all felt a bit tarnished. All felt a bit sad. Yeah, I can't say I'm not gutted that he's gone. On the flip side, given the way things were going, yeah, I'm not surprised either.
It's a strange one, isn't it? Because I think it's always been the thing about kind of heart versus head, even before he'd left, even when we were talking before the Europa and after the Europa League, it was like, I still don't really know what I want. Ideally what I want is to jump forward a season, know what's happened in that third season, and then jump back with that hindsight of being able to know exactly how it's going to turn out. But yeah, it's I don't know. There's the shadow of what happened with Ten Hag, I think, last season that's made Daniel Levy a bit jumpy. But it just feels like from an emotional point of view, it would have been nice to find out what Ange Act 3 looks like.
Yeah, and I think, as Thom said, the 2 weeks, including the parade, including that fantastic mic drop, they said I couldn't do it, one believed in me. Well, season 3 is always better than season 2. I mean, It's just, and you can tell, and I think the thing with Ange, take the results away, but he was the sort of guy that I would love to work for. You could tell that he'd back you up, and you can see the comments coming from the players.
Yeah. There's been one tonight, hasn't there? Have you seen about Van der Ven? Van der Ven's come out.
We haven't had the Romero one yet. I mean, no. I'm so excited to see what Romero comes out with because, it's going to be one for the ages, isn't it? If he's been a little bit diggy, just about, backing the transfer window up and all this kind of thing. If he was all Ange in, then I can see this being fantastic. I just think that he was building a culture that the players had really bought into. And as you said, Mark, it would be nice to know what would have happened.
Yeah.
Having said that, I completely understand to a point that you take everything all as one package. And if we hadn't have won the Europa League, there was no decision to make. If we got knocked out in the quarterfinal against Frankfurt, there's no way he would have kept his job. I really, really hope that he will go on to something.
And that's the thing, isn't it? In a way, I think it's good for both parties. I think it's a good thing for Ange that he doesn't get the chance to tarnish what he's done this season. And I think it's a good thing for the club that they can say, well, look, we had the 22, 23 defeats, whatever it was. We can't let that slide. But it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because like you say, without that Europa League win, there is no discussion. But I guess that is my question, is how much should be put on that game? And like you said, Thom, everything that has come since that game, how much should that have held in making the decision, just in terms of the momentum, the sentiment amongst the fans and all of that? Because that, to me, shouldn't be underestimated, about how good a place the club feels like we're in just after that final.
And I think that comes from the passion everybody felt, the waiting, the absolute waiting, the label, the Spursy label, and the jibes and the slings of arrows of sometimes quite reasonable fortune. But look, there are three sort of arguments that I sort of kept on appearing with regards to why it was probably the right call, or at least a justifiable call to let Ange go. First, you can't ignore the league form. Everyone knows the stats. We were the worst team not to get relegated. So you can't ignore that form. The second one was, but for a ridiculous Van de Ven clearance, we might not have won that Europa League. And the third one, and actually I've just thought of a fourth. The third one was, and put such stock in, this is who we are, mate. This is how we play. But he won that final playing really resolute, defensive, quite dull football. It was professional. We managed the game, which was, to be fair, one of the arguments to keep him, because he proved he could have tapped. But it was, I think perhaps even by then it was too late. And the last thing was about the quality in the Europa League this year. That, I'm not diminishing us achieving it with all the other things that we had to cope with this year. But the quality of the Europa League this year, the teams we had to beat to win, if you're talking about having to beat Bodo Glimt and a ridiculously poor Man United in the final, once you stack all those things up, and if you try and look at it in a sort of unemotional Daniel Levy sort of way, you can kind of see that was the only outcome we were going to get.
I think for me, the sort of there was two flip sides of the danger coin, wasn't there? The danger was that he stayed and the injuries still kept happening, because that was his big thing, wasn't it? There's an argument around the league form in the sense that the league became a non-event, from clearly his point of view, and it very much sounds like the players' point of view. They all bought in the dressing room to the league is practice games and rest games for the Europa League. We are going to put everything in the Europa League. Now, there's no clarity around what sort of conversation there was any higher up. There's rumours around, some people were on board, some people weren't, but it's a case of, well, if he was getting pushback from the Levy or whoever in the board, he was probably knowing that winning this is great for the squad, great for the team, great for me, but ultimately I'm not going to be here next season because I haven't got the backing to do this.
That takes a bit of pressure off, doesn't it, in a way? If you're of that mindset, if you know, like you say, that you don't have that backing of the board to do what you want to do, in a way that must relieve a bit of the pressure, because like you say, you know how it ends. So whatever happens is going to happen. And that must take a bit of, give you a bit of freedom.
And he clearly has a very, very strong mindset. I mean, in terms of looking at someone and seeing mentality to follow, it is absolute razor focused on doing what he felt was the best thing to do. And that's why I liked him. The issue now, I guess, is potentially there's another rebuild, but possibly it's better to do that now if you would feel that that's the right thing to do, than giving him into next season. And then what happens? We're 6 games in and we've won 1.
Yeah.
And then you're looking to change everything again. Well, you've gone through the transfer window. You've gone through managers getting signed on to other places and not wanting to leave clubs mid-season. I guess my huge criticism is that we're sort of coming up to 3 weeks since we had the biggest night for 40 odd years, and it feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it feels
really
like
does.
we've just gone back into a situation where it's just we're back on the treadmill of we don't really know what everything's going to look like in a few months' time. So
I have to admit that you're not wrong, because I think that was always going to be the case. If we were sacking Ange after he achieved that, then yeah, there's no way we weren't going to feel glum and uncertain and angry and wondering what's going to happen next. I have to admit, and it's definitely looking like Frank's going to be the guy, given that at least some of the noises I'm hearing and a lot of the reporting coming out that Thomas Frank was the guy. They might have looked at other people, but he is choice number 1. He's got that Premier League experience. Everything I've seen and read about him so far, that same sort of man management style that Ange has, that same sort of connection with the fans, that focus on sort of, building a community, getting the families involved. I feel at least confident that the person coming in is someone with Premier League experience, is somebody who I think is going to connect with the fans, is somebody who, at least from a playing style point of view, isn't beholden to one type of football, and therefore he's not going to be a Conte, he's not going to be a Mourinho, and he's not going to be an Ange. But that means we might not concede so many.
Yeah, I mean, like you, everything I've seen and read about him is positive. He puts a great value on the culture at the club, and he does seem very adaptable. My concern, and this is not a Thomas Frank thing, but as we just sort of said, there seems to have been a real good bond formed between the players and Ange, and just to kind of reading a lot of the comments about when Ange left, and I just worry that there's going to be that little bit of a brick wall put up to start with, which wouldn't have been there. It would have, if Ange had stayed. You're building on that momentum, whereas it kind of kills that momentum, doesn't it? Bringing in a new manager to start again and form those new relationships.
But do you not want, if you're going to hit a brick wall, do you not want to do it during the off season?
Yes, for sure. And to both of your points, if you're going to do it, you've got to do it now. There's no point. There's no point kind of waiting for 10 games in like we did with Nuno and then trying again. It has to be done now. And listen, I know, like you said, it all seems a little bit depressing at the moment with the fact that he's gone, and we've kind of, that little bit of gloss and shimmer from the cup has disappeared a little bit. But I think once he comes in, assuming it is going to be him, you give him the first few press conferences, you start seeing the players bouncing off him. Obviously, the transfer rumour will never stop once he comes in. I think it will start feeling a little bit more positive once you start seeing him get going. It's just this kind of no man's land in it, where the manager's gone and there's nobody in yet. So you just feel like lots of other teams are doing business and getting stuff sorted out, and at the minute we're standing still.
It just feels a bit like we can't have nice things, but hopefully we are going to have something nice. So there's some. As I'm coming out of the funk of just feeling bad for Ange, I just feel bad for him because I like the guy.
Yeah.
Coming out of that, the reality, of professional football is that most of the players are on very long contracts. Football is, manager cycles is 2 years. People change. They'll come back after their summer break. It's almost certain to be Thomas Frank. So he is a guy that clearly is, one of his strengths is man management. He's got this no dickhead rule. It's been spouted around, hasn't it? He's done an interview where he says, we have no dickhead rule. And that's really, really important. But the other thing is that he's come from a background of developing young players. So we've got a really, really young squad. He has developed players at Brentford. There's a reason why Mbeumo is being touted around. It's because he's a great player. The same with Ivan Toney. The same with Watkins as well. They all went through Brentford. And we've got a couple of players that Brentford really wanted. So they really wanted Archie Gray. Basically, we nicked them off Brentford, and they really wanted Johnson. So there's two players there that Thomas Frank had an awful lot of control over, an input over Brentford's recruitment. So he already has players that he clearly likes. And you put that into the mix with Bergvall, who's going to be a fantastic player, a fit squad. We have got a decent squad. We've got a much better squad than Brentford, player standard-wise. The big thing with Thomas Frank is that the stat is that Brentford had one of the lowest wage outgoings in the league. And he massively overperformed it every single season. He finished way above where the salary expenditure was in the league. And the closest correlation between league position and money spent is salaries. If you spend a lot on salaries, generally, unless you're Man United, you can't seem to work it out.
Yeah.
You finish high up the league. It's been time and time again, that's the way it happened. So you can see why Levy likes him. I quite like him because he seems very calm. He seems seems to be quite media savvy. He's done quite a lot, hasn't he, with these media outlets, and that might be because, again, you're not paid very well at Brentford, maybe, and it's topping his income up, getting his profile up, and all this kind of thing. But
They went the Monday Night Football piece that he did, and he's done a couple of other pieces where he's kind of had those kind of tactics specials. He's been quite open about what he does and quite transparent. It's quite nice to hear a manager talk so openly about, well, if this happens, this is what I do. That happens, that's what I do. He really kind of opens up quite a lot in those sort of interviews and sort of features that I've seen of him. So I think that's definitely positive. Like you say, he's definitely someone who can handle the media. Doesn't seem like he's going to be overly emotional like Ange got. That was the one thing about him as well, is that he seemed to really kind of get affected by different things that the fans were saying or different things that the journalists were saying.
I didn't mind it. Football can be so sterile sometimes.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that endeared him to me, because I just felt like he was honest. Like, actually, don't shout at me from the crowd like a prick and don't hurl insults at the players. These are my choices. Actually, no, I'm going to front up and I'm quite happy to answer your questions. But if you say this about my players, or if you write that article about me, or if you call me a clown, I'll call you out. And to me, that was great. I didn't mind it. I didn't see that as a weakness. And I'll miss it. Graham's right, though. Frank is calm, he's savvy, and I think he knows how to have those conversations without perhaps drawing the negative attention. Because I think sometimes that's why Ange got some of the press he did, because it was a good soundbite. The press knew they could rile him.
And do we sort of give him a pass on the massive gap on his CV, which is he hasn't won anything. He's not taken a team. Do we just give him a pass because it's Brentford? He stayed so long at Brentford.
I think you have to. I think it's one of these things where you can't sort of say, oh, well, you haven't got an experience, because no one's given him the chance to have experience. I think it would be different if he had gone somewhere and failed, but he hasn't. So you can only judge him on what he has done rather than what he hasn't done, I think.
I think one of the best stats I've heard about him so far, or rather sort of the job he's done, is about 4 years Brentford have been in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Now, if you said Brentford are going to come up to the Premier League, they're going to have 4 consecutive seasons, you'd be like, oh, that's impressive. Apparently, at no point have Brentford been in the bottom 3.
Really?
That doesn't sound possible. But if that stat is true, for the size of club they are, for the wages they can pay, and for the amount of competition you get in the Premier League, that's ridiculous. And for him to have, I think, 2 top 10 finishes in that time.
But in the way that English football is, that's a massive achievement. It is a massive, massive achievement. You know, he's built that club and he's done that. I think he seems calm and mature enough, you know, and level-headed enough and experienced enough now to be able to deal with the massively more bright spotlight that he will have at Spurs. I think out of all the candidates for a vacant job, I think he's a decent candidate. You know, I'm not disappointed. I think my disappointment only comes with the fact that I don't feel like Ange has been treated. I feel sorry for him.
Yeah. Like you say, I think from his perspective, he'll be fine. I don't think he goes away from this club as a legend.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad achievement, having finished 17th in the Premier League, right?
He did finish 5th to get into Europe. So the whole European thing is his management cycle. So you cannot take away. He got us into the Europa League from not being in Europe and won us the Europa League. So I think that deserves an awful lot of credit.
Here's a question for you. The team that we've got right now, fully fit, able to play all the games, where is that team in terms of quality, do you think? Because as I say, obviously we finished 17th, but clearly that team is capable of far better things. But where do you think we sit? Where's our kind of baseline level for that fully fit team being able to play all the way through the season?
I think you look at our backline, and I know there's been issues around Vicario, but maybe that's because of some of the panic situations our backline has put him in. But they're all internationals across that backline.
But everyone's an international in the Premier League.
Well, yeah, okay, maybe, but
Ben Davies is an international.
What's your point? But I think that we're solidly a top 10 club. We should be pushing for European places. If you look at our team against other squads like Brighton, if you look at our squad against like Fulham, even if you look at our squad against a team like Newcastle, I look at Newcastle's squad and I'm not thinking, well, you're all world-class players. I think man for man, if you put our squad up against Newcastle, you go, there's not a lot in it. So did that mean we're a top 4 club?
The Premier League is a top 8 league now, isn't it? There's so many teams.
That top 8 doesn't even include Man United.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. And so I think, as Tom said, we should be pushing for European places, and we should be able, with a bit of luck, to have decent cup runs. And for me, the reality is that, especially with this Club World Cup money coming into Man City and Chelsea now, generally, I'm really positive. I don't think we're winning the league next season.
I think that's a fair shout.
I think Thomas Frank is going to have to be judged against what this transfer window does. If they pull some levers and suddenly we're spending a lot of money on top of the squad basis we've already got, our first 11 is a very, very good first 11, and maybe even our first 13. It's what happens underneath that which has been shown to be a problem, and it always has been. So if you're bringing in 2 or 3 real quality, then I don't see a reason why we can't challenge at the top 4. See a comment from McAllister, away with Argentina, isn't it? So he's going to go back popular to Liverpool because he said Romero's the best centre-back in the world. Not Van Dijk. Romero's the best centre-back in the world.
Yeah, because he knows Van Dijk isn't going to run at him and 2-foot him from nowhere.
That's true. And Van der Ven, is a fantastic centre-back. We've got 2 of the best centre-backs in the league when they're fit and when they're on it.
What do I always say if I'm thinking about what do I want to achieve next year?
Mid-table and a cup win.
Top 10 in the cup, and honestly, given the season that's just gone, I would take that. If you're in the top 10, you've probably beaten at least 1 or 2 of the big teams. You've probably had a decent run. And if that top 10 in the cup, if that cup's the Champions League, happy days.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's the question, isn't it? Is we've sort of said, where do we think we are? But where do you think the expectation is from the board? What do you think, they're sitting down right now with Thomas Frank and they're saying, this is your target for next season. This is your target for the next 3 years. Where do you think they see us being as a kind of a realistic ambition for the club?
Champions League. I think with the investment, the size of the club, the stadium, the profile, I've always got the impression that Daniel Levy's got a hard on for the Champions League.
Revenue, though, it's 100 million quid just for turning up, isn't it? And it is for Spurs because of the amount of revenue they make on match days. And then you start going through to playoff round. Yeah,
you only need to finish in the top 24 to get to the playoffs.
Yeah. And it's that statement, isn't it, that they came out and that with when they sacked Ange, that they expect to be competing on all fronts. Well, that hasn't been the case. We don't compete on all fronts. We compete on 2 fronts. Ange competed on 2 fronts. Just happened that it was the League Cup and the Europa League.
Yeah.
Not the League and the FA Cup. So
that, again, boils down to squad size.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's always been the case, isn't it? Our second string is too much of a drop-off to be competitive in any competition.
It's like when we were in the Conference League that year, and we got knocked out by, I don't even know who it was that we got knocked out by, but it was it's as you say, it's been a recurring theme.
It was with these winner managers,
world-class managers.
Yeah, they couldn't get us over that. So there's obviously something around the club side, but there's been changes at board level as well, hasn't there? With the new CEO coming in and
Donna's gone.
You hope that the culture has changed a little bit. I think, unfortunately, especially English football now has gone to a point where on the balance sheet, winning an FA Cup and winning a League Cup is irrelevant. It's just a nice day out. The club needs to generate the revenue to pay £200,000 a week to players, and that's what a good player costs. Has to be top end of the Premier League and in the Champions League on a reasonably regular basis. And that's just the reality of it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just economics.
But what a day out, though.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, it wasn't a day out in the end, was it? It was 2 weeks.
Exactly.
2 weeks. I mean, I think I completed the Spurs internet. It came, I got the end credits. I basically watched every video. I don't know what the attendance at the Bilbao Stadium was. 45, 50,000, whatever
was
it is.
it? Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure I've seen every person's phone footage from when the final whistle goes. And that's what's brilliant, because it's been a change from when we last, because everything's filmed from a billion different angles, isn't it? So you get the footage of Ange at the end, Son at the ends, and all this kind of stuff. And it's not just what the TV shows you. I just think, old men crying is just makes me so happy. It's beautiful.
But even just kind of in normal life, the days after that, I've never seen so many people wandering around in Spurs shirts. It just seemed the whole world suddenly supported Spurs.
Yeah, right.
Almost as like, was this sort of like this shadow being that had been kind of living on the world, and then suddenly they were allowed to come out of the shadows and wear that shirt with a bit of pride. And but to your point, that doesn't pay the wages. It gives you a feel good, it gives you a confidence, but I think from a chairman's perspective,
it would have been interesting, wouldn't it, whether they would have done a trophy parade if we won the League Cup, because that's what was March, wasn't it? So what that would have looked like, because you sort of think, well, they would,
sure,
because it's a big thing. But the fact that Europa League was at the end of the season and it got Champions League, that's what the board would have been celebrating. The fact that revenue, and they were looking at the league and probably thinking, oh my God, but it gives us the revenue and the ability to do stuff. Because there's a lot of reports saying that Spurs aren't very cash rich at the moment because they've got so much transfer debt they have to pay. And without being in the Champions League, the summer would have looked a little bit dicey. So
no, it's a Brucey bonus. It's definitely a Brucey bonus with the Champions League money, and hopefully we can make the most of that and push on and have a good season. I think like I said before, I think there's going to be that level of optimism will start creeping up once we get someone in, once we start hearing from him and hearing the plans and hearing the unsubstantiated rumours about who we've got coming in. I'm sure it'll be left, right, centre, all over the place. But
and it'll be somebody we've not really heard of, and it'll be the last day of the transfer window.
Yes. So there's so many things that have changed in the past 3 weeks, but some things never change.